$9 billion budget is now being sold as an affordability plan, with a gas tax pause and a 10-day school supply tax holiday on the front page. But inside the same document, Illinois is raising new revenue from businesses, digital activity, fantasy sports, and more. Supporters call it balanced governing during economic uncertainty. Republicans call it a contradiction, and there is a number critics say reveals the real price tag. By the end, you'll understand what passed, why Tony McCombie attacked it, and who may feel it next. June 1st, Springfield, Illinois. $9 billion plan that every Republican opposed, with only a few Democrats breaking ranks. That timing matters. Budgets passed before dawn often tell you where the pressure was highest. The public message was affordability. The governing mechanism was a record-sized state budget, later signed by Gov. J.B. Pritzker, with a cleanup veto attached to fix drafting errors left in the final product. That is the strongest version of the case. Economic uncertainty was real, and Democrats argue the state still had to fund priorities without blowing up the balance sheet. That was the signal, and Democrats moved past it anyway. By the eighth budget of a governorship, the argument is no longer just about one fiscal year. It is about the brand a state has built around itself. For Pritzker and Illinois Democrats, the brand was stability with relief attached. The budget held new spending close to the prior year's level after supplemental spending was counted. It paused the scheduled gas tax increase. It created a 10-day sales tax holiday for school supplies in August. That is the strongest version of the case. If families are facing higher prices, even temporary relief can matter at the checkout line and the gas pump. But Republicans saw a different structure underneath it. $9 billion budget still required hundreds of millions in new tax increases, largely aimed at businesses and emerging digital markets. So the fight was not whether affordability sounded good. Everyone wanted that word. The fight was whether short-term relief can outweigh long-term cost pressure. And that is where the budget's real machinery begins. Start with the narrowest relief measure first, a 10-day sales tax holiday on school supplies in August. That is real. For parents buying notebooks, backpacks, and classroom basics, even temporary relief can show up on a receipt. The budget also suspends the scheduled gas tax increase, another visible pressure point for households, but then the financing side enters the frame. The revenue package reaches into businesses, social media, fantasy sports, and digital assets. It also lays groundwork for a possible digital advertising tax in future years. That matters because the affordability debate is not only about what the state gives back, it is about where the state goes to collect. And here's the mystery number. Senate Republican leader John Curran described the plan as record spending supported by roughly $800 million in tax increases. Reporting around the package places the estimate closer to $750 to $800 million, depending on which measures are counted. Let that land for a second. An affordability budget was being defended with temporary consumer relief, while its opponents were pointing to $750 million or more in new tax pressure. $9 billion, the largest budget in Illinois history, about $900 million more than what lawmakers initially approved for fiscal year 2026. Illinois leaders called it affordability, but the financing debate made it a referendum on who pays for the promise. Maria is 38, a medical billing clerk in Rockford, and before this budget fight, her plan was simple. Keep the car running, get through back-to-school shopping, and maybe start rebuilding the savings account that groceries and gas have been eating. In August, the 10-day sales tax holiday helps her. Not in theory. At the register, notebooks, folders, pencils, a backpack. The receipt is smaller than it would have been, but Maria's question is not whether the relief exists. It does. Her question is whether it survives the next month, because if a local retailer absorbs higher business costs, prices can move. If a small employer faces new fees or taxes, hours can tighten. If digital advertising becomes more expensive, customer acquisition gets passed along somewhere else. Fantasy sports users, online platforms, small shops, and workers who never appear in budget speeches all become part of the same chain. Maria is not debating ideology. She is comparing the visible savings in August with the invisible costs folded into everything after, $9 billion budget, the largest in Illinois history, and hundreds of millions of dollars in new tax increases. That is the loop. Service demands rise. Economic uncertainty pushes lawmakers to protect existing programs. Protecting existing programs requires revenue. New revenue often lands on businesses, digital platforms, fantasy sports, and financial activity. Then those costs search for an exit. Sometimes the exit is a higher price. Sometimes it is a smaller expansion plan. Sometimes it is one less shift on a schedule. Pritzker's strongest argument is not imaginary. The budget is balanced. New spending is described as minimal compared with the prior year. The gas tax increase is suspended. A 10-day sales tax holiday on school supplies gives families visible help at a specific moment. That matters, but read the structure carefully. Illinois is not broadly lowering the cost base. It is offering selective relief while building revenue through targeted taxes. Let that land for a second. Affordability is being delivered at the register in August, while the state collects more through the machinery behind the economy after July 1st. Her attack lands because it is aimed at the contradiction inside the math, not just the politics. The message says relief. The financing says extraction. And once you see that loop, the next question becomes harder. Who actually pays when the tax bill is written for someone else? Maria's next bill will not care that school supplies were cheaper for 10 days in August. That is the test Illinois now faces. The state can point to real relief, a suspended gas tax increase, a temporary sales tax holiday, and a budget leaders describe as cautious under economic uncertainty. But the structure still matters. If the relief is temporary and the revenue pressure is permanent, the household does not escape the loop. It just meets it later. Relief is not affordability if the bill comes back bigger, and Illinois is not isolated. New York, California, Chicago, and other high-cost regions are all wrestling with the same political equation. Promise affordability, protect spending, then search for revenue streams that look distant from the voter, but eventually move through prices, payrolls, and local investment. So read the budget summaries. Ask who pays after the press conference ends. Vote with the cost of living in mind, not just the slogan attached to it. Can a budget be called affordable if it raises taxes to fund relief? Tell me in the comments. If you want clear breakdowns of political claims versus budget reality, subscribe. That is the gap this channel investigates. If these numbers help clarify what taxpayers are actually funding, hit like so more people see them. Next, we look at another state-level affordability promise and the cost shift hidden underneath it. Thank you for watching. Stay sharp.